Project Egoist dropped a bit ago, adding to the plethora of blue log games that play with it. When playing with my friends though, we could only describe it in one way.
A faster blue lock rivals, but a slower AZURE Latch.
Yeah,
No, this is just a slower AZURE Latch.
It's easy to see the similarities considering, they all come from the same source material. The gacha systems, the animations, the flow, the mechanics, all of that is pretty much one-to-one. But what I really want to go into depth about is the goalkeeper gameplay. Starting with movement, there aren't any extreme differences at first. You have your side lunges and the forward lunge. Funnily enough though, in both games, you take longer to recover from the forward lunge than you do the side ones. In Egoist, you can even lunge into another lunge, which is pretty crazy. Another difference when it comes to the GK itself would be the distance you go when you lunge. It's really hard to measure it though, comparing both games and the fields, but you can definitely tell that you go further in Project Egoist than you do in AZURE Latch. This can be seen as a good or bad thing depending on your own perspective. Something else I should mention would be how metavision works/looks for both games. Egoist gives an estimate of the ball's height and where it will make a complete stop. AZURE Latch has this as well, but the yellow box constantly moves with the ball and more so just shows that it's still in the air. I feel as if Egoist has much more accuracy when it comes to the metavision thing. Asagi's flow state in Latch is actually quite similar to the GK metavision in Egoist. But that's all the baby stuff and whatnot. At their base, both games have a pretty similar way of making GK work. There's nothing to really talk about there. However, we can really start getting into what makes each game unique when we start taking into account what the GKs have to deal with. Starting with AZURE Latch, since it has a lot more styles than Egoist, there's a lot more to worry about. Camera aim curve shots, abnormally fast Magnus shots, super high Ren curves, frame 1 say curve shots, volleys. The sky's the limit really. The simple addition of camera aim adds a lot to think about. You truly have to know who you're going against to be ready for the endless combinations that camera aim allows. Will it be a ground curve shot? A straight curve shot? A super high curve shot? You never know. Egoist, however, is still new, and I believe they're dropping the Ren update quite soon, so maybe they'll add another curve shot to their roster. Or they'll give him something different. As for now though, you'll just have to stick to say if you want to do some pretty tricky curve shots in Egoist. AZURE Latch might take the cake in variety and curve shots. Egoist for sure takes the cake when flow is involved. That is if you just ignore auto goals and stuff like that. Range is a big factor for both games of course. Getting as close as possible is a fair gamble for flow shots. If you can juke out the GK's position, there's little stopping you at that point. That doesn't mean it's impossible to block it though. It's just your odds constantly teeter the closer or further you get. Going to Egoist however, the flow shots have a tremendous amount of power compared to their Latch counterparts. The thing is with flow, in AZURE Latch, you usually have time even if you're not in the direct line of sight of the shot in order to block it. Just for comparison, I did Big Bang Drive in a similar position in both games just to see the difference in power. As for my final thoughts, Egoist is simply the easier game to get into as a goalkeeper. The game is slower compared to Latch, so you can catch your bearings far easier. The movement also feels a little better there. It just flows nice. Since there isn't a lot of characters yet, Getting used to how each shot functions takes far less time. The windup of those shots are also way more noticeable and a little longer when compared to Latch. I'd say you're better off going into Egoist to understand how goalkeeping works for Blue Lock games than taking a step into Latch. Goalkeeping there is far more advanced, yet it solely depends on what's being used. The difference in difficulty when it comes to stopping a normal direct shot and a Kaiser Magnus can definitely throw you off your mark. Not just that, but the difference in how quickly you can recover as a GK is evident. Because remember, in Egoist, you can dive into another dive. There's just far less room for error in Latch. But what do you think? Is AZURE Latch harder than Project Egoist? Or is Egoist harder than AZURE Latch? And what are some things you notice when playing GK in both games? As always, thanks for watching, and God bless.